think it's time we have a chat about Petr Yan, ladies and gentlemen. I haven't planned anything for this video. I'm literally just going to say what I think and go through his record and talk about what's next. Before we do that, let me talk about my stance on Petr Yan through these recent performances. I should say, obviously, you will probably know that he lost his last fight on Saturday night against Merab Dvalishvili. A fight that I thought was a tough matchup for Petr Yan after his losses, I suppose, but particularly the second fight with Aljamain Sterling. I thought that Merab would cause him some issues, but I thought it would be competitive. It wasn't, not at all. Merab with a phenomenal performance. And whilst I think that Merab proved that maybe he's the champion in waiting, it was that good of a performance. Maybe you could excuse the fact that Merab was just the better guy on the night if this was a one-off, but it isn't. And the reason... You look at who Petr Yan has lost to, right? We'll just dive straight into it. He's lost to the champion Aljamain Sterling twice. One of them was an illegal knee. He lost a split decision to Sean O'Malley. And then a great performance by Merab. You'd think maybe the guy's losing to the best guys in the division. Most of them have been close fights, apart from the Merab fight. The Aljo fights were very close. One of them swaying in his favour until the illegal knee. One of them a very close decision. Another split decision. So back-to-back split decision losses. The Sean O'Malley fight was very close as well. A lot of people thought that Petr got robbed in that fight. And then this Merab fight isn't close. The reason that I'm doing this video is because I don't know if there's ever been a fighter who is as talented as Petr Yan, who is on a run like this, and it's not because he's been fighting a long time. You know, he's not a veteran who was once brilliant and has no longer got it. He's only 30 years old, and it really wasn't long ago. The first fight with Aljamain Sterling was in March of 2021, and that was a fight where a lot of people thought that he should pretty much just be declared the bantamweight world champion, and I for one had him as a pretty big favourite going into the rematch with Aljo. If we just break down those fights, so he obviously he wins the was it the vacant title that he won against Jose Aldo? I believe it was. Yeah, at UFC 251. That was in July of 2020 during the pandemic. That was the first big fight island one. That fight with Jose Aldo is one of my favourite fights to watch back. Not the last 2 rounds, they're not as good, but the first 3 rounds we have that swing where they're kind of figuring each other out. Yan takes an early lead. I think he drops Aldo and nearly finishes him or something at the end of the first round. It's been a while since I watched it back. And then Aldo adjusts brilliantly in the second round, and Yan manages to kind of re-counter him in the third round. It's a beautiful display of striking from both guys that I love watching. Great performance. Then he goes in and faces Aljamain Sterling, wins that fight, and I thought he looked... Well, I say wins that fight. He doesn't win the fight. He loses because he does that illegal knee. But he looked great in that fight up until that crazy moment. The way he defended Aljo's takedowns and just seemed completely unfazed by any of his pressure. I thought this guy is one of the... I legitimately, after that fight, considered him one of the top pound-for-pound fighters in the UFC. And I know that a lot of people at the moment, there's a lot of debate about pound-for-pound and what it really means. I just mean that his ability, if you take size out of the equation, his ability at striking, grappling, his fight IQ, his toughness, his cardio, could go toe-to-toe with anyone in the UFC if they were all the same size. Right? I think that makes sense. Anyway, loses that fight, illegal knee. Beats Corey Sandhagen. Quite an easy fight for him, I thought. Maybe not on paper, but the way it played out. Great striking from Petr Yan. And, sorry, I constantly flip between Petr Yan and Petr Yan. I'm sure a lot of people do the same. Then he loses the 2 split decisions. I didn't think that the O'Malley fight was as big a robbery as a lot of people thought. I did have Petr Yan winning 2-1. So I was surprised. But it was a close fight. It is what it is. The Aljo fight, again, I think I had Petr Yan winning, but it was very close. That one was super close. So that is what it is. And then the Merab fight. which wasn't close at all. I'm just pulling up the bantamweight rankings here. You look at the rest of the division. I feel pretty confident in saying that Petr Yan would beat most of those guys. But as I said at the start, the fact of the matter is he has won one of his last 5 fights. And that is insane for a guy that I thought would dominate this division for years. In my mind, the biggest threat to Petr Yan was TJ Dillashaw. And he's not even here anymore. You look at the rest of the bantamweight division, the rest of the top 10. Pedro Munoz, Ricky Simone, Song Yadong, Dominic Cruz. I think he beats all of those guys pretty comfortably. But even as I say that, I'm like, would he though? I don't know anymore, is the difficulty. I don't know if anyone else feels that. Rob Font is a tough fight. I'd still pick him to get the job done. He's already beat Corey Sandhagen. Would I pick him over Marlon Vera? That's quite a tough one now. I think I would still favour Petr Yan in any fight where it's a striker versus striker matchup. The issues have been with his grappling. But even then, the first Aljamain Sterling fight, I thought his grappling looked so good that I didn't think it would be an issue for him, honestly. But yeah, obviously I was wrong. Another thing that I've kind of been speaking about with some other guys is whether he's going to stay in the UFC. I don't know his stance on this, but he doesn't seem super happy from the outside looking in, at least. As someone who covers one championship day to day, there are some incredible fights for Petr Yan in one championship. I mean, if you think that one championship's weight classes are one up, so whilst you would say the bantamweight champion in one championship, Fabricio Andrade, would be an incredible fight for Petr Yan. The Muay Thai on display in that fight would be phenomenal. In reality, one championship's getting all my words wrong. One championship's flyweight division is actually the weight class that Petr Yan fights at, which means you could do Adriano Moraes or Demetrius Johnson versus Petr Yan. Or Petr Yan could just go up and compete at bantamweight in one, and he could fight Fabricio Andrade, he could fight John Lineker, he could fight Stephen Lohman, he could fight Bibiano Fernandez, those guys. Which I would love to see. But I obviously don't expect that to happen. I expect Petr Yan to continue fighting in the UFC and turn this around. But it's been strange. I don't really know what the fix is, honestly, either. But I still rate Petr Yan that highly that I think he could easily go back to being a monster. He just had some close fights. And I feel the issue with that is I feel like I'm making an excuse, which I obviously don't want to do, because I have no personal ties to Petr Yan. I like watching him fight, I know that much, but you know, I don't need to make excuses for him. He lost those fights. The Merab fight wasn't even close, and that is the kind of cause for concern, I think. But then Merab has the potential to do that to the majority of the division, I think, and completely shut them out. I kind of want to see Merab versus Cejudo now. I don't know if anyone else is like... Yeah, the Aljo fight with Cejudo is good, but Merab versus Cejudo... It's MMA recency bias, isn't it? Thank you for joining me on this rant of Petr Yan. What do you guys want to see Petr Yan do next? What do you think he will do next? I do think he will return to bantamweight. Potentially one of those guys between the top 5 and the top 10. Maybe if one of the guys lingering around the top 15 gets another win, you know, your Umar Nurmagomedovs, your Adrian Yanez's, your Chris Gutierrez's. If one of those picks up a win, then maybe they could be next or something like that. But yeah, very strange times for Petr Yan. And also let me know in the comments, do you agree with my assessment that Petr Yan is the first fighter of this quality to go on this kind of run? And it's not like he's past his prime. He's only 30 years old. Crazy stuff. Thanks for checking out this video. I'll catch you on the next one.